morning. As you said, thank you for the introduction. My name is Mike Campion. I'm the regional president for Sika in Asia Pacific. I'm responsible for 21 companies in 19 countries through the Asia Pacific region. India is the fourth largest country in the Asia Pacific region. And for me, I'll jump ahead to maybe to a conclusion. It's really an area where we expect tremendous growth and huge potential going forward in the overall market. So it's really a market that we believe in, and you'll see through the presentation, despite the challenges that we've been asked to discuss today, the challenges and the experience we've had in India, we really see huge potential and future growth in the future. So first and foremost, what I'd like to do is take you back where we started out in India, how long we've been there. 31 years now in India. And we started out as a joint venture. Early on, we wanted to determine what was possible in India. We didn't know how to do business there. We struggled a little bit in the beginning, and we did this through a joint venture. So we learned the ropes a little bit. We opened our first production site in Kalyani, which is just outside of Calcutta. And then we stayed in this operation for quite some time, you see almost 10 years before we got a ISO certification to really bring the manufacturing facility up to a higher level and really start to get now on a more European type level of production qualities. Then in 2003, Sika AG finally took complete ownership. So we dissolved the JV. We moved to a fully owned Sika company. And now we began to look much more seriously into investment. We've learned a little bit. We know a bit more about the country and how to do business there. So now we start to push more strongly into the market. In 2008, we shifted our headquarters from Calcutta, which is then and now still the base of our operations in India, is very strong in Calcutta. And we moved to Mumbai, which is really, as you know, the base or the center of business in India. In 2013, is another big step for us. It was our first acquisition in India. We acquired Texa. Texa is a bituminous waterproofing membrane company in Manda. And with this acquisition, it kind of gave us the taste a little bit maybe for acquisition in India. We continue to be active in searching out and finding acquisition potentials in India. There's huge potential there, and we believe in continuing that pace. Finally, in 2014, we opened our latest factory and R&D center in Jagadia. Jagadia is a city just north of Mumbai. This is really a state-of-the-art plant, our first state-of-the-art plant in India, and it's attached to a global technical center. So not only do we have production of our liquid products, our mortars and grouts, and also epoxy products, so really a full range of an emerging market economy, but also a fully supported global technical center for India. So this is really kind of how we started out in the business. If you look now how we're set up today, we have 7 sales offices spread throughout India, and we have a number of factories, again, spread out through India. Kalyani, which is our first in West Bengal, just outside of Calcutta. We have Bagru in Rajasthan, and this was in 2000, you see in the west. Then Chennai in 2006. Again, all of these plants were based on liquid production for admixtures and mortars for grouts and bag products. Then Howrah and Bengaluru, this was both done in 2011. At this point, we had some issues with land development, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. The difficulties with land acquisition and land rights in India. So we were forced at this time to look at outside, rather than buy our own properties and build our own facilities, we used existing tollers. And this allowed us to move into the market more quickly and to develop the market for sales and operations, and then come back later and bring in the manufacturing capacities. The 6th and 7th plants, Manda, which was the acquisition of Texa, as I mentioned earlier, the bituminous membrane factory. We brought that in 2013 in Rajasthan, which is very close to Jaipur. And then in Jagadia, which is our last plant, as I mentioned earlier, really the state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line plant, now with the global R&D center. So what I'd like to talk about now, some of the main challenges that we saw in the market. Through our experience, we've met a lot of challenges, and I think they come into really 4 categories. The first 2 categories is people, how we find, train, and develop people. And more importantly, in India, I think that the issue is the retention of the people. Second, we look at the infrastructure demands. We've heard from Dr. Rosalie that infrastructure is really at a premium, 60th in the overall ranking. So really a difficulty in infrastructure. And then how to expand that business. Second, we'll talk, or third topic we'll look at is customers. And in customers, we look at supply agreements and accounts receivable. So how we go to the market and what customers we attract. And finally, we look at the government side. And this is taxation complexity, how we deal with the customs activities, and finally the legal system, which can be quite onerous in the Indian market overall. So first and foremost, we look at the retention of staff. For me, this is probably the biggest topic, not only in India, but I think in any company throughout our region and really throughout our company. One of the favorite quotes that I have with management is that you don't build a business, you build up people, and people will build the business. So there's nothing more important than finding the right people, bringing them into your organization, training them, and then retaining those people so they really can drive your business going forward. The difficulty we have is there's a huge demand for skilled, qualified people in India. And it's very, very difficult in the Indian market to hold on to these people. What we found is our employees, even the very strong ones, probably the strong ones are the most valuable in the market. They'll change jobs very quickly. So as I review resumes of even mid-level or top-level management within the region, we can see a guy maybe 34, 35 years old and can have 9 or 10 different companies on his resume. So, and this is not unusual, this is very, very typical. So people will jump very quickly. There's very small reasons. Typically, it's career growth, and second, of course, is compensation. We learned from Hayes that in India, the global attrition rate, or the attrition rate globally, is greater than 25% in India. So every year you're losing a quarter of your employees to attrition. So this is really a challenging development to keep a business running and to stay effective. Once you've trained these people, we have to keep them. So we really focus a tremendous amount of time and activity in employee retention. One of the other things is, of course, finding a way to keep people engaged and happy while the salaries continue to rise. So what we find is on typical salary increases, it's 12 to 15% per annum increase in salaries in the market. So if inflation is more or less between 4.5% and 5.5% inflation, we're increasing people's salaries 12 to 15%. So it really creates a bit of a drain and a bit of an activity in the overall market. So the next thing is you have this moving workforce that constantly is turning over at 25% a year. One way to battle this is to bring in a larger number of expats. So you bring people, experienced people from within your company who are trained, who know the business. They can train the local people and create some sort of Sika spirit, if you will, to keep these people engaged and involved in the business. What we find is, though, in the major cities, when you have cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, they're major metropolitan cities. They have very high population densities within the cities. And what you find is it creates a premium on activity for expat housing and expat schools. In these areas, you can always find appropriate expat housing, but it always comes at a premium. And with the infrastructure demands and needs, it's quite difficult to move people around the city. So you're very limited in where people can live. Additionally, what most expat families look at when an expat and his family come to live in India, it's how do you find a place for them to go to school? And if we look at Mumbai as an example, there's only about 5 premium expat schools in Mumbai, and it's the access to those schools is quite difficult, and the ability to get into those schools is even harder. So we really have a difficulty in transitioning these expats from outside of India into the Indian market. And it's much different than just fish and chips and moving to Tali. It's a bit more difficult. We had a recent example in the market. I had one of my long-term managers. He did work for us. He's a French national. Did work for us in Vietnam for 5 years. Then he took on a general management role in Cambodia. So not such an easy place to work as well. Another 5 years in Cambodia, very high performer, did a great job. We wanted to move him to India. So he said, if you move to India, we have to do at least a 1 week transition just to get an idea, get a feel before you sign on the dotted line. He did 1 week, and after 1 week, his response was, it's a little too spicy. And he wasn't talking just about the food. It was really about the issue of, he said, the people, the way of doing business, the environment, the pollution, everything is just a little bit too spicy. So what we found is with people, especially when bringing expats in, it's really all about, you know, you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. And I find very few people that are gray about India. It's either you really love being there or you really struggle being there. So this has always continued to be a challenge for us, but we're always on the hunt for good people in India. So next, if we look at the acquisition of land, for me, land acquisition is probably the largest impediment to business in India. With the land rights and the regulation, it's really quite difficult. Particularly a company like Sika, which is a mid-sized company as far as our land requirements for construction. So this site here you see is actually a site that Sika is looking at just west of Calcutta. Please, no one buy this lot. We're still looking at it. But you can see, I mean, typically when they have a new industrial park set up for development, typically you're not allowed to buy in unless you plan to build immediately. And typically the rules are you have to build on that site within 5 years. Well, typically what happens is the government lets it, the locals will come in and buy all the property very quickly and then sit on it for at least 5 years. And they'll do the bare minimum they have to do to keep the property rights, but they'll let that go so they get a premium now on the property. So they'll come to you maybe 5 years later, nothing's been developed, and now you pay a real premium on this industrial park. But you have to be in the industrial park. Private land ownership, if you buy in a private land deal, you'll never pass due diligence within your company. And if you do pass due diligence, you'll never produce on that property. The requirements, the permits, these local landowners, you'll never get there outside of an industrial park. So this one advice I would give, never go outside an industrial park. We had the experience many years ago. It took us almost 15 years to resolve. We bought the land. We were never able to produce. We were never able to use the land. And we finally sold it at a nice premium. But it took us 15 years to do so. So it's, you really have to be in these industrial parks. And the key with the industrial parks there as well is once you're inside, the development is very slow. So as I said, this is about an 8-year-old industrial park west of Mumbai. It's on the Calcutta-Mumbai highway, so it's a very nice location. But you see on the backside, it's residential. On the left, it's agricultural, so it's not ideal for a chemical plant, but it is within the industrial park, so it's a good location for us. It has all the right regulations and things, but you can see even after 8 years, the infrastructure's not completely in. You don't have all the roads, you don't have power, you don't have sewer. They have one building built. It was built 4 years into the development. It was a motorcycle factory. They built this factory. Within 2 years, they left. So the building sat dormant now for the last 4 or 5 years, and continues to bring no value. So while this is a nice site for us, the land acquisition and land usage in India is probably, for me, it's still the biggest barrier for successful integration in India. So next, we look at the weak infrastructure. I know we talked about this, and this is probably one thing that everyone is very familiar with, is the infrastructure demands and the infrastructure needs in India. Right now, India really needs massive, massive investment in infrastructure in India. They need roads, they need ports, they need logistics centers, they need power, they need water. So good news, bad news. For Sika, as you saw earlier, we have plants all over the country. We have them east, north, south, east, west. We have to move raw materials around. We have to move finished goods. And we have to move people. So for us, it's really a challenge in this bad infrastructure. The good news is for Sika, we like to build roads and bridges and ports and power and water and infrastructure. So for us, we have to be there. because we want to be a partner to these customers that build all these structures. And we've done this for many years now, 31 years in the country. So we have a long history of helping to build this infrastructure. And I'll talk about later some of the reasons why this infrastructure is so slow. But we need to fix this, and we want to be a partner to fix this. And this is one of the driving reasons why we're so excited to be in India still. But just to give you kind of an update, I mean, we talked about Prime Minister Modi, and one of his promises was that in the next 5 years he would double the kilometers of interstate highway within India from 96,000 to over 200,000. So now it's coming. There's a lot of things in place. Not everything's out to bid yet, but the potential is there. So we hope that some of these projects come to fruition. As you said, there's a lot of promises. We haven't seen a lot yet, but we're very optimistic. For this north-south, east-west highways would be a huge success and a huge win for India. And one other I should mention with these highways and the roads, as you're moving properties, if anyone who's traveled in India, when you see the trucks on the road, there's huge log jams at every toll station. So the new implementation of the GST, the new tax system in India, while it's still a bit complex, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more, but while it is complex, it's much simplified from where it was. So when you move down the highway now, it used to be that every state border, you would have to stop and do all the paperwork for every truck. And it's created huge log jams. There's no e-tolls, there's no e-processing on the highways. So at least now with the change in the tax codes, you have a much smoother transition. The traffic moves a bit better, and I think overall it'll be better for the economy. However, they still a long way. It's a bit antiquated, and they still need some e-adaptation in the market. So next, we want to look at supply agreements, and now we move into kind of the customer area. And supply agreements, I know I saw in the earlier presentation, the concept of supply agreements isn't really useful in India. You know, most of us, when we do business with someone, we have a supply agreement, we have a contract, we both honor the contract, and everything works fine. In India, this concept doesn't really exist, or at least from our experience, it doesn't exist. The contract is flexible, particularly in terms, as I'll talk about on my next slide, it's quite flexible in terms of payment terms and credit limits. So people don't really like to pay you, and if they do pay you, they're going to make you wait for it. So, this is an ongoing struggle that we have, and what happens is you go from this long-term supply agreement where, as a vendor, I can invest in R&D, I can invest in my internal support systems to support a customer, but if they become very transactional, where you're competing for the business, every transaction you do with this customer, it makes that relationship much more difficult. And I think a lot of this was driven by the state-owned entities in the government and these big government contracts. The government doesn't pay the state-owned entities, the entities don't pay the contractors don't pay the vendors, which is us. So we're a bit far down in the cycle, but this is an ongoing problem. So now, for the big projects, they've come now with new insolvency laws, and the insolvency laws now allow us to essentially lien a project where we can get paid more quickly under threat of dissolution. So it's something I think as Sika we would never do, but it's nice for sword rattling to kind of get the payments flowing again. And I think as they improve the legal system, we should see improvements here. Maybe the last point there, I know, again, PM Modi, one of his initiatives is a government direction to the Reserve Bank of India to clear the logjam of bad loans and bad debts. And this real logjam of bad loans will start to free up money in the industry. As the money frees up, it's going to free up accounts receivable, accounts payable, and we should see movement again in the overall industry. So next, accounts receivable, this kind of flows from what I just talked about. But you can imagine, because there is no concept now of credit line or credit terms. So it's very fluid. It's very transactional. So what we do with these new insolvency laws, we can do a credit demand. So we can demand payment under threat of liquidation. So typically we can get paid in this account. But it's really a cultural shift. Because of these state-owned entities, when they slow down payments, government slow down payments, then essentially the whole business, particularly in the construction market, slowed down payments. So we found that it became more and more difficult to get paid on time. Now, having said that, the good news is that you normally do get paid. You're just going to get paid slowly. And delays in payments are really now the rule rather than the exception. So it's quite common now. But again, as I said, it's a cost of doing business, and we can make do. Yes. Yes. I mean, to be honest, Vietnam is a huge market for us. It's our 5th biggest country, and actually the payments are quite good in Vietnam. We're much more established in Vietnam. Our market shares are much higher, over 50% market share. So we move much more easily in Vietnam. Yes, you have a very good country manager. Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you very much. So next, what we can look at is taxation, and the tax complexity in India is really tremendous. It's something which really can't be ignored. Now, the new GST is a great development for us. We went from 16 individual taxes down to essentially 4 tax bands. You know, you have 5%, 13, 18, and 28 now for luxury goods. So it simplified things, but it's still, on the overall view of taxation, it's still quite complex. And not only with the GST, why it's simplified a lot of things, there's still a lot of very antiquated laws, like the customs law, the packaging commodity rules, which really slow business and make it difficult, I would say, to do business overall in India. Maybe one of the biggest issues is the tax man has really almost draconian powers that they can come in and if you have a disagreement with the tax man over a very small issue on packaging or the tax paid for a particular product, he can shut the plant down. I mean, so they really have tremendous powers, and so the tax authority is quite difficult to deal with. And what we found is you have to be as transparent as possible. Of course, as a good Swiss company, we act very transparently all the time, but you really have to be active and actively pursuing the tax people to address all of your individual tax requirements as you move through the year. And I would say it's still not to this point a pro-business concept in taxation in India overall. Customs clearance. We talked earlier when we talked about infrastructure. One of the big issues on infrastructure is the lack of ports. So there's very few ports. It creates a huge bottleneck at the ports. Also, so as well, it's backed up, so it slows down your inventory. So what does that mean? It's a higher cost of doing business. You have to keep higher inventories, higher demurrage. Tax cases become much more difficult because it's backed up at the port now, and the tax man certifies your product as one tax code. We maybe have it as another, so it freezes the thing, and then you sit again at the port. So it's, I believe as they build more ports, they bring more activity in infrastructure, this will start to ease this tension. But right now, this really for us causes a very high cost of doing business because of these demurrage and holds at the port. And really, when we talk about these products and the custom clearance, sometimes the same product in 2 different chapters will get different tax rates. So essentially, immediately, no matter what you do, if you go left or right, you're stuck. So again, we have to proactively address these tax issues upfront going forward. Next, the legal system. I don't have enough time for a discussion on the legal system because this could go on for another hour. But tax cases take an incredibly long time to handle in India. I can give you just a personal case. We had a tax case. It was a very simple one. It was just a product classification. We had a disagreement, so we accrued all the money. We waited, and we just solved it last month. We actually just solved this tax case after 15 years. 15 years for over a simple product classification. And of course, when you have the first one, every time you sell a product, it stacks up behind. So now the good news is we won it, and we're going to get some compensation, but it really slows down the whole process, and this tax code and the legal system is tied up. There are legal firms you can hire in India to extend things 10 years. Just say, take me out 10 years, and you can drag it out. If you're on the docket for a legal case, and you don't make it on the docket that day, you don't go roll over to the next day, you get a new date. And a new date could be a few months later. And this could go on and on and on and on. So it's, I think the judiciary is severely understaffed. I think they have real difficulty in getting cases to court. The government now, I'm very pleased about, they're moving much more into pushing companies towards arbitration. So as they move to arbitration, we should be able to finish much more quickly. So all these challenges, all these difficulties, why India? It's very clear. The World Bank invests $7.9 billion in new infrastructure in India. We want to be a part of it. 100 smart city programs are being invested through mega cities throughout India. We want to be a part of it. And BMI forecasts a 6.1% growth in the construction market next year. This bodes very well for us, and we want to continue in this way. So finally, just an accelerated expansion capacity. We want to continue to build plants. In our Plan 2020, we have 3 new plants planned for India. So we're going to continue to build. We're going to continue to grow. And we're bullish on India. We believe in the market, and we're going to continue to grow and expand in the Indian market. Thank you.